This is Geek Gab with your host. That's me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Monday, May 4th, 2026. Oh my gosh. I cannot tell you. Words cannot relate the number of things that have gone on today to get in my way to bring the show to you. Not to mention everything that's gone on the last several Saturdays that has prevented us from going on the air. So, just a few little pieces of trivia. The intent for tonight was to start broadcasting at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific. Those are American time zones for those of you who are outside of America. I'm sorry. I don't know. You can do the math. Monday night. Now, the intent going forward is to broadcast on that time every Monday night. Because the Saturday morning time slot has proven to be an insuperable obstacle. And ever since I've learned that world as a little kid, it reminds me of Superman. Insuperable, and in this case, that is precisely correct. It is as if Superman himself has been standing in my way, punching me in the face every single Saturday, preventing me from being able to get on the air and do the show. And so I have finally decided no more Saturdays. It is Monday night for me again. At the time that I almost got to start broadcasting tonight. So, tiny bit of technical troubles tonight. Nothing to worry about. A little bit frustrating. Everything's cool. We're cool. Totally cool. Everything that can possibly be cool is completely cool. I have a bottle of water that is filled with water. I have a new cup from the theater I went to today. As you know, if you've been a listener for a while, I tried to buy collectible cups every time I go to the movie theater. They did not have anything for Project Hail Mary. I was gravely disappointed in the movie theater. However, they did have a cup for The Mandalorian and Grogu. Technically speaking, the title on the cup is Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu, only in theaters, which is going to be a lie in 3 months after the release of the movie, I predict. So not only is this not the cup I wanted to get, it is also lying right to my face, right in my beautiful pearly whites. This cup is lying to me. Only in theaters. It is to laugh. However, on the obverse side of the lie, there is, in point of fact, a picture of the Mandalorian and Grogu. And the hilarious thing about this cup is when I went in to buy my ticket, I then went down the long tunnel to the concession stands, and I walked in to buy my concessions. They hadn't even entered it into the computers yet. So they had them out to buy, but hadn't put them in the computers yet. And I had to wait several minutes for them to do so. So technically speaking, at this one particular location, not only did I not get to buy a Project Hail Mary cup, I was also forced to gain the dubious distinction of being first in line for a Mandalorian and Grogu cup, as if I had waited out in the rain overnight to purchase this piece of merch. I picked it up and was in line before it was even in the computer. So no one else could possibly buy it yet. And there was one guy in the line behind me. I did not want this signal dishonor. I did not want to be the number one guy to buy any Mandalorian and Grogu merch at this particular Cinemark location. But here I am at the front of the line, the guy, that guy, the American otaku who waits in line. When they open the doors, he runs in screaming and grabs armfuls of merch and sets them down and buys them first because he is so excited about the movie. I will say I just bought one cup. I didn't buy the other cup or the 2 buckets of popcorn they had, or some helmet, or some at or some Grogu thing, or whatever other merch they had, because it is my tradition just to buy a cup. The guy behind me and his wife did that. They bought all the stuff, all the merch. But I was still first in line for this cup. And now I shall bear that shame for the rest of my life. People can say, hey, didn't you literally stand in line and wait to buy a Mandalorian and Grogu cup? And I will have to say yes. Yes, I did. Yes, that was me. I literally did that. And this wasn't even my fault. Oh, I wanted to buy a Project Hail Mary cup. They forced me to do this. This is not my fault. This was forced on my heads by Cinemark. I cannot be blamed for this. This scarlet letter on my chest is unfair. I want to go on record. I want to go on record that this was not my fault. Just to be clear. So anyway, after after being brutalized by the merch line at the, I was almost going to say airport, being brutalized by the merch line at the theater, I was further brutalized by actually paying for the drink and the pizza. And then I went and watched 2 movies. And I was brutalized again. Because I went and I watched Project Hail Mary. That was not what brutalized me. I'm going to review Project Hail Mary. And I don't want to give the review away, but it is not going to be a bad review. I mean, the review is always excellent around here. Always excellent reviews. But it is not going to be negative about Project Hail Mary. And then I came out of Project Hail Mary and I said, because I wasn't going to be getting picked up for another couple of hours. I was stuck at the theater, literally landlocked inside this theater until the car that was picking me up arrived. I could not leave. I had at least one more movie to watch. So whatever the next movie starting was, I didn't have, but I couldn't wait to watch. I had to watch. I was forced to watch whatever was next. I need to stress this. I had no choice. I did not have any leeway in the schedule. I had to watch whatever was next. I left Project Hail Mary as soon as the final credits started, and I need to get into the next movie absolutely right then. So I asked them, what is the next movie that starts right now? Now, what is the next movie starting right now? And this is when the theater, metaphorically speaking, jumped up and punched me in the face again. Because the next movie that was starting was The Devil Wears Prada 2. And I said, in a vain attempt to try and convince myself not to do this, to say to myself, if this movie is too long, then I can't watch it. I will just have to sit down and do Twitter until my ride arrives, or read an ebook or listen to Audible or something. I said, well, when does it get out? And they said, 5:15, which was the exact window I had told my ride to show up and pick me up. I said to them, the movie I'm going to be watching is probably going to be getting out at 5:15 to 5:20. So I paid money to go see The Devil Wears Prada 2. Now, technically, this perhaps was of my own free will. You could argue that. But I was placed in circumstances beyond my control when I went to see this movie. So I'm going to be reviewing Project Hail Mary and The Devil Wears Prada 2. Not because I planned it this way, not because that was what was in my heart when I left the house, but because the circumstances of the day just conspired to funnel me down this path. And I was first in line to buy, literally before anybody else, even before the otaku family who bought all the merch. I was first in line to buy a Mandalorian and Grogu Star Wars only in theaters cup. And then I had all the technical difficulties before the show. So as you can see, it has been an amazing day, an exciting day. I'm so glad to be here right now. This is awesome. I am smiling right now. Can't you hear the smile? Okay. I want to talk about Project Hail Mary first, because I feel like that will lift my spirits, and my spirits are in dire need of being lifted. Before I do that, I'm going to take a sip of water. Because during this show gets my throat scratchy for some reason. I can't place it. So Project Hail Mary, surprisingly enough, is not about America saving Matt Damon again. Matt Damon isn't even in this movie. I don't know what to do. I thought he was in all the space movies now. It's befuddling. It left me for a loop. I almost didn't, I almost couldn't take it right at the beginning. But Project Hail Mary is about when the sun, our sun, is going dim. We have obviously a lot of alarm on the planet, because if the sun goes dim, the earth gets colder, the crops fail, lots of people die, and perhaps it leads to the extinction of all life on earth. So Ryan Gosling, who I'm just going to start this review right now, does an absolutely excellent job. But I'm of the opinion that Ryan Gosling always does an excellent job in every movie he's in. He is sometimes given subpar material, but he always does an excellent job. I haven't seen everything he's been in, but I've seen a lot of his movies, and I've always been impressed. He just knocks it out of the park every time. Now, he has a certain range as an actor of the parts he does, and he generally stays within that range. But within that range, he's always been excellent. I would like to see him in a role that pushes him outside of that range to see what he can do. So anyways, he plays a scientist. You learn this right off at the beginning of the movie, who is in this spaceship. And he wakes up, and everybody else on this spaceship, 2 people, are dead. I'm not giving anything away. This is the opening scene. You literally cannot spoil a movie by talking about the opening scene. That's the first thing in the movie. There are no spoilers in the opening scene. He wakes up in this spacecraft. Everybody else on board is dead. And he is 11 light years from home. And he's on his way to another star system, and he's suffering from retrograde amnesia. He can't remember why. He can't remember who he is. He can't remember his name. And the ship he's on is called the Project Hail Mary. He refers to the AI who's running the ship, a science fiction AI, not a real world AI, which would be a complete disaster. He calls it Mary. And if you know from the commercials, if you've seen any of the trailers or heard any of the talk online, he reaches this other star system where there is a secret, where there is something going on that everybody on Earth is hoping will illuminate what's happening to Earth's sun in such a way that they can save Earth's sun from going out entirely and shutting off entirely, and thus save all of life on Earth. And around this sun, he meets an alien who is a who looks like he's made out of a rock, who he calls Rocky. And then between the two of them, they have and face dangers and face difficulties and learn to communicate, and then various things happen. So I'm not giving away the ending of the movie. There are things that happen to them to provide obstacles, and they strive to overcome those obstacles. By the way, the Project Hail Mary mission is entirely one way. And we learn this in the opening scene. Everyone on the mission is expected to go to this alien star, gather all the information they can, load it aboard probes, and send those probes back to Earth, and then die of starvation or lethal injection or however they want to, because there's no fuel to get them back to Earth. So it is very much a big damn hero mission. And during the movie, as Ryan Gosling's character recovers his memory, we see flashbacks to, we learn who he was before he got on the mission. We learn how he got recruited for the mission. We learn what it is that's causing this, the sun to be going out. We learn what it is that why it is he qualifies for the mission, what it is uniquely that he brings to the mission, and all of the other things in his past that matter. Why he is on this suicide mission to literally save all life on planet Earth, to literally save the sun itself. And many of the things that happen are surprises. Many of the things that happen are the book that this movie is based on was written by Andy Weir, who we had on the show back in 2018 with the rest of the Prometheus Award nominees for that year. So yeah, we've had Andy Weir on the show, the guy who, wrote the book that The Martian, the movie, was based off, and the guy who wrote the book that this movie was based off of. And so, he's very technical in his writing. He's very hard science in his writing, but he is not a soulless humanist. He also wrote, I believe, the Amos and Andy web comic. If you want to go way back, 20 years back, to web comics. For those of you who used to read web comics, same Andy Weir. And I read that web comic when it was new and still posting. So, I was an old reader of his when he started writing science fiction novels. So he wrote this book in a very technical way. He wrote this book in a very biologically detailed way, in a very scientifically detailed way. It's based on the life cycle of the life details of this alien that he's with. It's based on cultural details of the alien, how it communicates, and how humans communicate, and how they have to figure out language between them. And all of that plays a part in this. It's a first contact situation. If you've seen, oh, dang. I can't remember her name, and I can't remember the movie's name now, but it was the name with the big spaceships with the circles and the black ink. As they're trying to learn to communicate, several scenes that are like that, but more comprehensible, because there's no time travel going on. Oh, spoilers. You cannot spoil a movie that's more than a year old. That's the policy here. That is the spoiler statute of limitations, as if it exists on the internet anymore. Technically, the spoiler statute of limitations on the internet is 0 days, but I try to honor a longer one. That's okay, because I couldn't even tell you what the name of the movie was anymore. It stars Superman's girlfriend from the last Superman, though. Amy, what's her red hair? So anyways, and it contains all these elements without either overwhelming the audience or boring the audience. Amy Adams in Arrival. Thank you, Simon Hogwood. Yes, Amy Adams in Arrival. That is exactly the movie I was thinking of. If you've seen that movie, you know the kind of scenes I'm talking about. The difference here is, all of the big, long research type scenes take place in the past. And so they intersperse those things in the past with, the present, where things are life and death all the time. So it's like tension, tension, tension. Oh, he remembers his memories. We flash back to being on Earth, where there still is tension because the sun is going out. And then they come back. So they're always switching back and forth. They are always bringing you tension in a different way. And by switching contexts, it forces the mystery of each step to go on a little longer, because there's a hacking problem in movies. The hacking problem in movies is nobody finds it exciting to watch someone sitting at a keyboard typing. It's impossible. It doesn't matter if they're typing really fast. It doesn't matter if you shoot it from like 15 different Dutch angles. That's the canted angles that are off kilter. It doesn't matter if you put heavy rock and roll on it. It doesn't matter if it's Hugh Jackman. It doesn't matter if there's a gun to the head of Hugh Jackman. And it doesn't matter if he's trying to do it while he's being orally pleasured by a blonde model. That's a real movie, mind you. Um, with John Travolta. um, so all of these scenes with research and looking through microscopes and stuff could be phenomenally boring. But they're not, because whether they're in the book or not, I don't know. I've never read the book. I've never listened to the audiobook. They're not boring because they take what's going on and put it on the screen in a manner that is immediately easy to decipher visually and audibly, without belaboring things, without dumping a lot of technobabble. They describe, basically, they describe looking through different spectra to scan through the spectra of a star to see what's going on without telling you what that means, other than that they can detect different elements. So they describe spectral analysis without giving you all the big heavy stuff in it, and they use that technique. They describe how a life form reproduces. They describe its life cycle. They describe where it reproduces. Natural predators. The fact that an alien has a different poisonous atmosphere and that our atmosphere is poisonous to it. They set up the stakes of what's happening with this alien life form so that when it leaves its environment and it starts, and you like it enough by this time, it starts dying, bad things have happened. And when you see like this trail of what would be blood in a human, but is the alien's equivalent of it, something is going on, and it's done quickly, and they give you enough information to understand it without overwhelming you with information. And it's done obviously enough that general audiences, it's not just smart people who get it. General audiences have enough information to get it. They do not belabor the point. They do not assume that the audience is stupid and they need their hand held all the time. They get all the information the audience needs when the audience needs it, and just enough to understand what's going on in the next step, without giving them too much detail to overwhelm them and make the audience just make them glaze over, make their eyes glaze over. And so it is a very well done script and directing on that level. And let me tell you my emotional responses. When bad things were happening and they were straining to overcome, I was tense and excited. I was worried for this puppet and the human character on screen. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted them. I'm having emotional reactions to a story, which is why stories exist. Now, I understand if you are perhaps loath to or unused to this concept, because you could look at the past 10, 15 years of movies and say, none of these movies have made me feel emotions. I don't get emotional when these characters are in these fights. I don't get emotional when these characters are talking to other characters. I don't feel like they're being threatened. I'm not nervous when the bad guys come on screen. I like watching the fights, but because, they're pounding each other and getting thrown through buildings and things are happening. But, even in the romantic comedies, we just don't care. But I want to assure you that at one point in the history of cinema, it used to be possible to watch movies and to have the movie wrap you up in the story so that you actually felt empathy for the characters on screen, even if they were stupid little robots, even if they were little puppets. E.T. was a stupid little puppet who looked on one level fake, but on another level, you could just forget about it and watch the movie and buy that it was alive for the movie and just enjoy it. And man, when E.T., the extraterrestrial, the alien in that movie, when it was dying and the little boy was dying with it because they were linked together, it was heartbreaking. Now, I was a little kid at the time, that's fine. But it was still, man, this happened to many, many people. That's why E.T. was one of the top grossing movies of that year. This used to be the way all movies were made or tried to be made. And they have fallen off in the last decade and a bit. But this used to be what movies were made for. This used to be what we went to movies for. And so, unlike most, but not all, but most of the garbage in the last 10, 15 years, technically like the last 12, 13, this movie made me feel things, emotions, elation, danger. I gasped when a character jumped over this void and did something daring to rescue something that was needed. Not because what was at stake was the fate of Earth, but because the character himself was risking his life over an infinite void to accomplish something heroic. And it felt like he was accomplishing something heroic. Whereas when Captain Marvel was flying through all those ships and blowing up all those enemy battleships, you didn't feel anything. It didn't feel heroic. Didn't feel like she was even in danger. She was just blowing up ships. It was just sparks on the screen, just big bright lights. Nothing was exciting. So this movie got me invested in the characters, got me invested in the story, got you feeling something even for background characters. And it worked. It was so very worth my time. And I had a comment that my sister made. The movie theater, as I mentioned before on the show, is like 35, 40 minutes from my house. So my sister was took me to the theater today because I didn't have other transportation. And she said, as we were driving, when we were talking about the movie, she said, I said, yeah, a lot of people seem to like it. A lot of people really seem to like it. And she said, is that because it's good, or that it's because it's kind of mediocre, but it's so much better than all the other garbage that's out now? Well, my answer to you is that this movie is actually genuinely a well done movie. It's well made, well shot. The special effects are fantastic, are spectacular. The performances are great performances. All of them are good performances. There is none of the none of the actors of the characters turn in a bad performance. There is no clunky performances. The performance of the alien who he makes friends with is fantastic. The puppeteers and the voice, the person who does the voice, who voices the alien, is just incredible. Whoever made the sound effects for the alien also did a great job. They're fantastic. So on a technical level, it is great. And as far as directing goes, the movie is tight. It cuts scenes short that needs to be cut short so you can move along quickly on things that need to be there. They deliver the information they need. They serve their purpose to give you the emotion or the information so that you're not lost, so that you're brought along. And then scenes that need to breathe, scenes that need to be longer, to have the emotional weight of that particular scene settle in on you. Like a scene of an exploration of this alien ship before he meets the aliens, before you really know what's going on. It's dark, it's scary, and you get this feeling of oppression, of tenseness, of the unknown, of risking his life, of unease. And they let that scene breathe. That scene gets enough time on screen to pull you into that emotion, to give you that feeling, because you need time to get drawn into that subtle an emotion. And the lighting and the way it's shot and the music, the silence in the corridor, the little bit of dust in before the very little bit of light that's coming from the lamps on his head that only illuminate this tiny circle of light on the wall as he's looking back and forth. All these things combine to make this tunnel feel really claustrophobic. And that scene gets the time it needs to develop. So it is tight where it needs to be tight. It is cut fast in a scene that needs to be nervous and frenetic, but it is cut slower in a scene that needs to be longer, needs to have lingering cuts, or needs to have a shot that is just moving down the hallway, looking left and looking right. The direction is great, and it is a fantastic movie. This is an A++ movie. So yeah, I would very definitely recommend you go see Project Hail Mary. And like apparently just about everybody else has recommended it. That is my review of Project Hail Mary. Go see it. It was a fantastic movie. We only have about 10 minutes left, which is fine. Because even though we started way late, I have to kick off at our normal time. So let's talk about The Devil Wears Prada 2. The Devil Wears Prada 1 was about the fashion industry. It was based on an article that was published in a magazine about a girl's working as an assistant for, I believe, Anna Wintour of Vogue magazine, and her telling her experiences working for this highly demanding, just insanely demanding boss who was always fighting to stay on top in this tumultuous industry of fashion where you always have to be on the cutting edge, beyond the cutting edge, and how she survived almost a year working for her as her assistant, and all her insane demands and all the pressures and insane pressures that were put on her boss. Then she wrote a book, a memoir of the year she spent there. And then they made the movie about the book, but fictionalized it with a fictional magazine called Runway. And the character's name, instead of being Anna Wintour, was Amanda Priestley, and so on and so forth. So it's a fictionalized version of this real world experience this girl has. And the original Devil Wears Prada was almost a perfect movie. They faltered right at the end because her friends were complaining about her and to her that entire year, saying that she was spending so much time working at this magazine instead of partying with them. But she was working for an absolutely demanding boss. And the point is, if she could last for an entire year working for this insanely demanding boss, she could get a job anywhere in journalism, at any magazine or newspaper she wanted, because she will have done something that absolutely almost nobody ever succeeded at. And in a recommendation from Miranda Priestley would make her career possible. That's all she would need to get hired, even at the sort of serious journalist, investigative journalism newspapers that she wanted to work at that did real journalism, unlike this frivolous journalism. And at the end, so she's doing something that's critical for her life. This is the first movie still. And her friends are whining about it all year, despite the fact that this is the critical year for her entire career. Everything in her future hinges on this 1 year. So she needs to focus on this 1 year, focus on her job, focus on being there when her boss demands her to be there. If she is going to be a professional woman, if she is going to have a career and sacrifice for her career, this is everything she has to do. She has to focus on it 100%. And for that year, her friends come second. That's it, period. Any man in that position would know that, and his friends would know that, and they would support him, because that's the career thing. And if her friends, who are all on the left, if her friends supported her in her career, they would 100% be on board with this. But the fact that they are undermining her career at every step means that they are being the selfish ones. They are being the whiny ones. They are being the ones who are not supporting her in doing what she needs to do to start her career in journalism. They are at her most critical moment, undermining her career. So this is the thing. If your worldview says women are going to be in a career path just like men, then you have to give them the same opportunities as men. And I'm not talking about the boss. I'm not talking about the employer she got hired by. I'm talking about her friends. You have to let her succeed or fail on her own, and you have to sit down and shut up and support her. You cannot treat her like she's a second-class citizen for working hard in her career. So they are the ones who are in the wrong. They are the ones who are whining. They're the ones who are damaging her and taking things away from her. And yet at the end of the movie, it tries to portray her friends as being in the right. It tries to make it seem as if she has somehow sold her soul for working hard, for excelling, for literally pulling off things that are utterly impossible. At one point, she makes a huge mistake. Her boss goes to fire her, and her boss demands that she get the next unpublished Harry Potter novel for her little twins. Miranda Priestly, The Devil Who Wears Prada. That's what the title of the movie is. And she has a contact who knows someone in the printing press for the American edition of the unpublished Harry Potter novel, who steals a copy of the unpublished manuscript and gets it to her so she can run it to a Kinko's, photocopy it, and return it. And gets copies made and bound. Literally an impossible task that she pulls off for her demanding boss, her insanely demanding boss, and she succeeds at it. This is something she should be proud of as a career woman. This is something she should be proud of as a human being. That she did the impossible for an impossibly demanding boss, and that she got to the end of this. And the movie makes it seem at the end that doing all this hard work and coming in at the end, it tries to make it seem like she sold her soul somehow. But she never sold her soul. She never did anything unethical. She never did anything immoral. She never did anything wrong. She was placed in an impossible position and not only succeeded, she absolutely absurdly excelled. And that should have been the finish to the movie. That you absurdly excelled. What happens is she feels guilty about something that happened that she had nothing to do with. Miranda Priestly makes her feel guilty by saying something that she did was wrong when it wasn't wrong. And so she walks away to try and preserve her soul. And even though she abandoned Miranda Priestly in the middle of the most critical week of the year, Fashion Week in Europe, without any other assistant there to provide help, literally abandoning her when she is most needed, with no one left to take up the slack. The worst possible thing she could possibly do, Miranda Priestly still gave her a recommendation for her next job. Said to her next boss that he would be an idiot if he didn't hire her, and she still got her edge into the industry. So, her boss, Miranda Priestley, whatever negative things they said about her in the movie, was not vindictive, did not seek to destroy her career over literally the worst thing she could have done to leave that job. So at the end, the movie stumbled and fell when it was on the verge of absolute genius greatness. But it is still a great movie. It's a movie that explores what fashion is, why fashion is important, why fashion is actually a serious industry. And despite the fact that for regular people, fashion and beauty can be taken too far, why fashion and beauty is actually important and worthwhile. So, The Devil Wears Prada is one of my favorite movies for all of that, because it's worthwhile to see into the fashion industry. It's got a message that is in the movie that the movie itself is wrestling against. And maybe that's because the writer of the book, or the girl who did these things, it wasn't introspective enough to see what was going on in the story. Whatever. Maybe she was trying to put a construct on the events in her retrospective sense making that isn't there. Whatever. So is The Devil Wears Prada 2, does it live up to its predecessor? No. There were times in the story where I was feeling emotions and I was caught up in the story. The story does not give you the same insight into the fashion industry. Instead, the story is about how modern journalism is being shut down. It opens up with a bunch of investigative journalists just finding out that their newspaper has been shut down, and they all receive, and we're supposed to feel this is like a big tragic thing. They all receive texts telling them that their newspaper has been shut down. And the movie is set in 2026. The original movie was set in 2006, so it's been 20 years later. And I will be absolutely blunt. The unprofessionalism that is rampant in the newspaper industry nowadays is the cause of the fall-off of the newspaper industry. It's the cause and the fall-off of AAA gaming. It's the cause and the fall-off of comic books. It's the cause and the fall-off of movies and TV. It's the cause and the fall-off of publishing companies. It's the cause and the fall-off of so many other things. And so the fact that there are newspapers going out of business is not some random thing that's happening like the weather. And they're trying to make me feel like this is a completely tragic thing. They're trying to make me feel all the emotions for these journalists getting fired. And it's a tough row to hoe. I just never felt that. Yes, there were people there. They had faces. They talked about their families and stuff. But it's like, look, I'm too connected to the real world where I know what happened. This is a small, independent, investigative paper who is somehow still owned by a big corporation. And they've been shut down. I know what papers like that are like. I know what their editorial slant is like. I know what stories they're likely to cover and what stories they're likely to cover with a pillow until it stops moving, to borrow from Iowa Hawk. I know. I graduated from college with a degree in radio and print journalism. This is the thing I was trained to do professionally. Okay? I know this field. I know what we should be doing in journalism. I know what the professional ethics should be in journalism. And I know what we are doing in journalism. And I know that that gap is big and it is frankly embarrassing. I don't want to rant against journalists here. This is not the point of the show. So I'm not going to do it. I will just say, trying to make independent journalism the hero of the show was a mistake. Because if you're going to do that, the way they investigated and explored the fashion industry and its strong points and why it worked and what it did for the country and what it did for individual people and why beauty was important. And it's possible that in the first movie, they didn't realize how that's what they were doing. They really gave Miranda Priestly the space to make the case for fashion. And maybe she was the designated villain. So you were supposed to think that all those words were evil and you weren't supposed to understand the fashion industry. But because you were just supposed to think she was such a horrible person that everything she was saying was wrong. But that is the movie that taught me to appreciate the fashion industry. That is the movie that taught me to understand why clothing matters, why your appearance of wearing nice clothing actually matters, why it's important to show up to events in good-looking clothing, why looking like a bum all the time may be the sort of rebellious thing that grunge rockers can get away with. But there's also another way to approach it, which is showing up in a finely tailored suit looking like $1 million, and why that makes a different impression, why the choices of your clothing say different things about you, whether or not you look like you are in tune with the moment, or whether you look like you're emo or goth, or whether you look like you are a professor in a tweed suit, or whether you look like you are California casual, like people who work in the movie industry. What you are wearing in your choice of clothes says a lot about you. And it was The Devil Wears Prada that taught me to value those things. So maybe all of those things that the movie brought across were just an accident. And they didn't mean to do that, and they did it on accident. Because even though Miranda Priestly is supposed to be the villain, they show you her home life and why she's under a lot of stress. They show you that she is really good at her job. She's not a loser. She is fantastic. She is top of the fashion industry because she is legitimately good. She can sense when clothes are good fashion, when clothes are bad fashion. She is always dressed to the nines, and she always looks great. The phrase I learned later is they call it fashion forward. That never appears in the movie, but they call it fashion forward, where you are on the cutting edge of fashion. And Miranda Priestly is exactly that, and she knows what it will be. She criticizes designers, invite her to look at their collections before they go on the runway, and she tells them, no, get rid of this bow. No, get rid of that hat. This is a hideous pattern. Don't use it. And these fashion designers listen to her because she's right. Now, she may be the designated villain of the movie, but that kind of competence and skill, at least to a man watching a movie, says to you, she is just mean because she is operating in a professional venue, and that is clear and quick and concise communication that doesn't have the time to be kind. And she is doing a ton of things every day. And maybe she'd be better if she was more kind, but she's right. Basically all the time. She's right. And at home, she has a lot of stress between her husband and her. There are huge sacrifices she's made to be right for her career. But if you are a man and you want to be the absolute best, you have to make sacrifices. And if you're a woman and you enter into the professional world and you want to be the absolute best, you also have to make sacrifices. And what those sacrifices are and whether they're worth it is up to you. And that has to be the message of any movie about the best of the best in a professional world. That has to be at least a sub-theme. It can't all be you go girl, girl power, yes, queen slay. It has to be you have to work hard. There are going to be sacrifices. These sacrifices are what makes it possible for you to succeed. There are long hours. You have to put in the time. You have to cut down extraneous relationships and focus on only those ones which matter. And other people who are going to be in your life have to realize there are sacrifices to be made. If those things are not focused on, it is a lie. And the first movie showed it throughout most of the movie and failed. And even in this movie, which isn't as good as its predecessor, they show it. Because the main character is this young girl who was the assistant in the first movie. And in this movie, things go bad at Runway, the magazine run by Miranda Priestley. So they bring her in to be features editor now. And Miranda Priestley didn't know about it. She's used to running the show at her magazine. And the magazine's owner throws in Anne Hathaway's character and just makes her features editor without consulting Miranda Priestley, which drives her up the wall because nobody does that to Miranda Priestley. She throws her in, makes her features editor above the head of Miranda Priestley, and then she has to work with that, and they show that in order to excel, she is there at late nights. And they show that in order for her to have had this career in journalism for the last 20 years, she has remained unmarried. She has sacrificed all these things in her life. I don't know that was deliberate or if they were just putting in this message, because this is a very messagey movie. There are a lot of messagey things in this movie. I don't know if that was deliberate. I think that was more like a girls don't need no man moment, but that was also served to show in order to have her career and maintain her career and keep on working in her career, she had to make personal sacrifices. She wasn't able to go out and get married. She was never able to have kids. She was never able to, her fiance in the first movie is nowhere to be seen because he had his own career as a chef, and that would obviously take him in a different direction than her working as a newspaper woman. And it is... Miranda Priestley has gotten divorced at least once since the first movie. She's married someone else, played by Kenneth Branagh. doesn't have very much material, does a decent job with the material he's given. This movie just has a lack of thematic clarity, has a lack of consistent characterization. It's all about how tough it is as a journalist, how hard the market is to do real journalism, how noble journalists are, how they just want to go out and find the tough stories and tell the truth. And that's like the central theme of the whole movie. And in this day and age, with the class of journalists we've got nowadays, who have, by and large, abandoned journalistic ethics, it just doesn't work. Nobody loves journalists. Nobody has a warm, fuzzy feeling about journalists. Nobody believes that journalists are really doing this anymore. Nobody believes in journalism as a profession. So we don't buy it when this is being sold to us as the plot of the movie. We're not going to look at this and say, why, yes, I believe that all these characters are hero journalists who just want to do real journalism. And then by the end of the movie, that's the final message. What saves Runway is the hero journalism carried out by Anne Hathaway's character. And it saves it from, the corporate greed of the media company owners who are trying to cut it back to the bone. And you just don't care. It's not about the fashion industry at all. And the problem is the first movie, when it was about the fashion industry, was allowed to dig into the details of the fashion industry and tell you how it worked. They said, okay, the shirt, you think you're above the fashion industry. They said this to Anne Hathaway's character, who thinks she's above all this stuff, all this clothes and beauty and makeup stuff. It says, look, there was a designer who I think 5 years ago had in his show these particular collections that were in blue. And then that was picked up by a bunch of other people the next year. And then that arrived at mass market people who started producing them for stores who were influenced by his collection that was just shown once at a fashion show. And then mass retailers picked it up. And then you picked it up out of a remainder bin because it was cheap 2 years after it ceased being fashion. You think you're above all this fashion industry stuff when in fact the clothes you're wearing right now are a result of decisions made in this magazine's editorial room and the fashion designers in New York. The clothes you see on the rack are a result of decisions made in the fashion industry. Whether you realize it or not, all of this stuff in the fashion industry has a direct result on the clothes that show up on the rack, on their colors, on their styling, on whether they have patterns or whether they have stripes or whether they are solid raw colors, on whether they have big colors, on the color of the buttons, whether the buttons are large or small, how they're arranged. All of these things are determined by decisions made by fashion designers who show their collections once. And then their collections go on to be on, worn by models in high-end magazines, and they influence other people and eventually end up in the remainder bins. And it's It was like getting slapped in the face when I saw that, because I had seen little pieces of that before in articles, but I hadn't put that whole chain together. And having that whole chain put together for me, recognizing that that was true. Maybe it wasn't literally true in the way she said it, but that as a general rule, that ecosystem exists, and it does work sort of that way, generally in a similar manner in the real world. So the fashion industry was allowed to make its case for why it's influential. It is about trying to bring beauty, bring attractive clothing to people, bring a standard of beauty to the world, so people have something to aspire to. And aspirational things are not intrinsically wrong. Well, you go back to this movie, and journalism never makes its case. There is no detailed explication of what journalism is, of how journalism operates, of how journalists operate, there is no defense of the industry. There is no explanation of the industry. Journalism is just assumed to be good. There are vague paeans of serious journalism. There are vague paeans to investigative journalism. They're all vague. They're all far removed. There is no detail. So you never get a grasp on what journalism is. Fashion made its case in the first movie and made it very well and opened up your mind to what fashion is. Journalism, which is the center of this movie, ostensibly about fashion, never made its case. And it was appalling. If you're going to try and make journalists the heroes of the movie, then you need to present why they're heroes. And this movie never did. And in this day and age, journalists are not credible heroes. They're just not. And they need to start being real journalists again if they want to ever be considered cinematic heroes again. This is not 1971 or 1973. This is not Walter Cronkite when he was trusted and loved by the entire nation. This is not, you're trying to make All the President's Men with Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, and you're just not doing it because there's no details there. There's nothing there to make journalism work. You're coasting off of the presumed prestige that was gathered by past generations and has now been entirely squandered. It's not there anymore. So, were there emotional moments that worked in the movie? Yes, I got drawn into the story. But frankly, I got drawn into the story because I cared about the characters from the first movie. A person who'd never seen the first movie wouldn't care about these characters at all. It was all nostalgia for a 20-year-old movie. And I first saw it 20 years ago. And I've talked about it on the show before. This Devil Wears Prada, I've talked about it on the show before. So people who do not have a 20-year-old love for this movie, I don't know that they would like this movie at all, because there's nothing to grasp. There's no reason to buy into Miranda Priestley. She's given appalling outfits to wear. They're not fashion forward. They're not beautiful outfits. They're really ugly, some of them. There's this one that's covered entirely in tassels. Tassels, like the end of a carpet. And I'm just looking at it thinking, this movie is just making fun of the fashion industry, and it's making fun of Miranda. It's trying to make her look ugly. Anne Hathaway demanded there would be plus-size models instead of thin, tall, attractive models. There are precisely 2 of them in the opening of the movie, and then they don't appear in the rest of the movie because they barely have catwalk scenes. They barely have models show up for fittings and stuff. And they just, I guess 3, there's one who shows up in one of the scenes. They just, I find the waifish thin models that show up in fashion shows and in fashion magazines to be less attractive than women with fuller bosoms. And they are there because they fit the aesthetic tastes of the kind of people who become male fashion designers. I'm sorry, people are going to call me phobic for that, but that is an open secret in the industry. People in the industry, the fashion industry, talk about that. Everybody knows it. I'm not phobic for talking about something everybody in the fashion industry already knows. You cannot blame me for that. So back the hell up off me. A woman who is more bosomy is one thing. A woman with a belly is something else that is not attractive, that may be fine for certain catalog shoots or catalog pages on a web page, but you do not put that on your front page of the magazine, and you do not put that forward on a fashion show. And the fact that that had become dominant in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, the fact that that had become dominant in the Victoria's Secret Angels show, that was appalling. That was anti-beauty. That was wrong. That was the fashion industry being hijacked by political ideologues who did not want to entertain. They wanted to push a political position. And we are pulling away from that sort of thing now. And it should be done away with, because that is not beautiful. That is understandable, but it's not beautiful. I understand that there's a war on beauty in movies. There's a war on beauty in the fashion industry, which should be about beauty. And we just have to continue pushing back against this because it is appalling. Beauty is beauty for a reason, and we need it. It is aspirational. It gives us something to look forward to. It makes us want to be better people, to dress better, to groom ourselves better, to act better. When you are clean physically, when you're well-groomed physically, when you are wearing nicer clothes, you feel better and you act better. You act more genteel. You take care of yourself. Yes, there are plenty of rich sociopaths out there, but there are plenty of poor, ill-dressed sociopaths too. Okay? Fashion is about beauty. Beauty is critical to a society. Art is about evoking emotions. That's why movies exist, to evoke emotions. That's why Project Hail Mary succeeds and The Devil Wears Prada 2 doesn't. Because Project Hail Mary evokes emotions. It gets into the details of who its characters are and what they're doing and what they're facing and why. And The Devil Wears Prada 2 doesn't. It's vague. It is unfocused. It does not tell you what the first movie did. The first movie is great. I recommend it. to anyone who is willing to sit through a movie that is on the surface kind of girly, but underneath it is very masculine oriented, because it's all about competence, it's all about confidence, it's all about the brutality and ruthlessness of the professional space. It's just about two women operating in a man's world, operating in the professional world, and having to deal with the sacrifices of it. Oh, that's sexist. Sue me. Sorry. The Devil Wears Prada 2 completely fails to live up to its predecessor on that level. It was nice to see these characters again. It was nice to catch up. It was nice to see what their futures are like. But as a movie, as plots and everything like that, it fails to live up to its predecessor. Okay, I really do have to go. This has been Geek Gab for Monday, May 4th, 2024. It's Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Star Wars is still dead. Despite the fact that I got the cup on Star Wars Day. I've been branded as an otaku on Star Wars Day. I bought the Mandalorian and Grogu cup. The theater has done this to me. I bear the shame forever. But I thank everyone for tuning in the show today, for sitting here and listening to me talking about all these movies. If you like the show, click a like, tell your friends if you like the show, so they can come and listen to the awesome and intelligent and deep discussions about not just what makes movies great, but about the themes behind the movies and how they click in. So, this has been Geek Gab. We're here just about, we are going to be here Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And hoping to get some guests on the show. Hoping to continue reviewing movies Monday nights here on youtube.com/geekgab. Once again, youtube.com/geekgab. And the plan is in the future to start again syndicating it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and the Google Play Store. We want to get that set up and running again. So, I, your host, Daddy Warpig, am tuning out for today. But don't you worry, don't you fret, I will be back.